Okay, here's a comment left under one of my videos. It's a very simple point, but I think it's one that people need to be aware of. This individual says, one thing I noticed years ago with pasta is that the effects lasted longer than other carbs. Even at 3 or 4 hours, it either wasn't coming down or it might even be drifting up. So that's a really bad thing about pasta. And it's true. It's not just true with pasta. There are certain foods that have a prolonged effect on their blood sugar rise. It rises maybe slower than others, but it will keep you up longer. Pasta is one. And tortillas are another one. Tortillas, usually you won't see too much rise at 1 hour after eating tortillas. Their major power, if you want to call it that, to raise your blood sugar is going to be seen more at 1 hour and a half, 2 hours, sometimes even 3 hours. Whereas white bread or a potato, they're going to kick in their greatest blood sugar spike at about 1 hour after you finish eating them. So that's why you can't always just say, well, I'll test every time at 1 hour after eating or 1.5 hours after eating. It kind of depends on the food. But when you think about it, it makes sense. A piece of white bread is soft, and you can see where it would easily be dissolved in your stomach once you eat it. It's very soft. Whereas pasta is harder. It's kind of put together tighter, and it's going to take your stomach and your stomach acids longer to dissolve. Same thing about a tortilla. If you compare the texture of a tortilla versus a piece of white bread, they're just totally different. The tortilla, it will take your stomach longer to dissolve. Therefore, don't test a tortilla after 1 hour if you want to know where you're going to spike. It's probably going to be closer to 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and sometimes even 3 hours. And another issue with spikes is part of it's going to depend on what you eat with it. The worst possible spike you'll ever get is when you eat almost pure carbs for a meal. Whereas if you eat some fat and meat with those carbs, it will kind of slow down the spike. Now, I'm not saying that's the answer, because that's kind of the standard American diet anyway. You're just eating almost everything, carbs and fat and protein and just everything. And that will be less of a spike, but it'll be a longer spike than if you ate just the carbs. So be wise when you test, and don't be too impressed if you eat pasta and after 1 hour after eating, you find your blood sugar's not too bad. It may be closer to 2 hours. Same thing with tortillas. Beans are another thing. They will take their time. And nuts will take their time. Nuts are hard and crunchy, and they dissolve very slowly in your body. But the good thing about nuts is they're not that high in carbs anyway. So not only are they slow to dissolve and slow to release their carbs, they don't have that many carbs anyway. So there are some complicating factors in testing your blood sugar. And when I was young and just starting out to test my blood sugar, I didn't think about any of that. I just, 1 hour after I ate, that was my standard time to test. But that got me off and running. And that showed me a whole lot. Later, I learned and got a little wiser and so forth. But just doing that all by itself, without any experts, much, and not knowing very much, but I knew one thing. The minute you stop eating, you either set a timer or you keep an eye on the clock. And 1 hour later, that was my standard rule. Now it's more like 1 hour and 15 minutes. But 1 hour later in those days, you test your blood sugar. And it gave me some pretty good comparisons. And I found out that the worst kind of carbs, the ones that dissolve the fastest, and they are the worst. At least pasta takes its time, and that gives your body a little bit of a chance to deal with those carbs. Bread does not take its time, and it doesn't even matter if it's whole wheat bread. It won't take its time. It will quickly break down into sugar and spike your glucose. Potatoes are the same way. They don't take their time. within an hour, most potatoes, and that's even true of sweet potatoes, you're going to see a major, major spike. So, and that's the worst case of all, when they spike that fast and hit that hard. But better yet, whether slow or fast, better yet, just eat low-carb meals that aren't going to spike much at all, period. Not at 1 hour, not at 2 hours, not at 3 hours, not ever. And that's why you just don't need to test your glucose when you eat meat and a garden salad, as long as your dressing isn't very high in carbs. There's just no point to it. It's just like eating a steak and an egg, or a steak and a couple of eggs. Why would I test myself? I know there's going to be almost no blood sugar rise. I know that now. There was a time I didn't even know that, and I had to learn it all pretty much from scratch. But nowadays I do, and therefore I don't have to test as much as I used to. So become an expert on your own body, my friend. Become a researcher on you. It's good to research on others, I suppose. Some people make their living as a researcher. Well, I've never made my living as a researcher, but I have become a researcher on Dennis. I know how Dennis responds to foods and how his blood sugar reacts. And that's been a good thing to know. And here I am, an old man, and still not doing too bad. All right, here is another comment left under one of my videos. This individual says, I believe this was a lady. She says, I was diagnosed about 2 years ago. The doctor never gave me any advice on nutrition. Rewind. The doctor never gave me any advice on nutrition. He actually encouraged me to use Gatorade. Why in the world would a doctor encourage a diabetic patient to drink Gatorade, which is laced with sugar? What kind of a medical school did he go to? Where did he get his degree? You better check on that degree and see if it's written in crayon, because if it is, maybe he's not a real doctor. He prescribed glucophage, which is a form of metformin, which I did take for about 2 months, she says, and then saw your videos. You mentioned Jason Fung. I listened to him. Jason Fung is a doctor, by the way, and a kidney specialist, and is a MD. And so she says, I'm not on any medication, and my last A1C was 5.2. 5.2. I've lost weight, too, from 220 down to 177. So lost weight, 5.2 A1C, which is just about perfect, especially for an older person. If you're 16 and you've got an A1C of 5.2, I wouldn't call that perfect. But if you're 70 or 65 or 60 and you've got an A1C of 5.2, I'd say that's just about perfect. Just about perfect. And doing so well. So, but again, she says the doctor didn't give me any nutritional advice. No advice about what to eat, what not to eat at all. I mean, you're a doctor, you're seeing a diabetic patient, and you don't have a single word to say about diet? Are you kidding me? It made me think of one word, and that word was malfeasance. And just to reinforce the point, I looked up malfeasance on vocabulary.com, and they said this: malfeasance is bad behavior, especially from officials or people who should know better. Well, amen to that. If nothing else, the mal in malfeasance will alert you to the fact that something bad is going on. Well, that's right. You know, if someone is maladjusted, they're badly adjusted. And if someone is malevolent, they're a bad person that wants to harm you. So they say today malfeasance is usually a bad deed done by an official or an organization. You wouldn't, I like this, you wouldn't accuse a dog who peed on the carpet of malfeasance, but you would accuse a mayor who took a bribe of malfeasance. So for a doctor to say nothing, zip his lips about diet and just give you a prescription of metformin and tell you go your way, God bless you, Something's wrong there. Diabetes is a lifestyle disease. In fact, I don't even like to call it a disease. I like to think of it more as an affliction. Because when I think of disease, I think of something, number one, that has nothing to do with your behavior or your lifestyle, and something that is often contagious. And diabetes is not any of that. It does have to do with your lifestyle. In fact, it has everything to do with your lifestyle, and more particularly, your diet. And to just shove some metformin at someone and not say a word about what to eat, what not to eat, just is so wrong. I was thinking, if you had a teenage son that's just learning to drive and you didn't teach him how to change a flat tire, well, that's kind of a mild form of malfeasance. That boy needs to learn how to change a flat tire, especially teenage boys usually are driving cheaper cars and sometimes used tires. They need to know how to change a tire. What if you said, well, I won't teach you how to change a tire, but I'll give you a phone number for a mechanic. He'll come out and fix your tire for you. So the kid has a flat tire. He calls the mechanic, and the mechanic charges him $225 to fix his flat tire, when the kid could have got out and changed it for no cost at all. Well, that's just wrong. But that illustration isn't quite perfect, because when you fix your diabetes through a dietary intervention, it's actually far superior to taking any kind of diabetic meds. They aren't nearly as good a fix as a dietary fix. Dr. Jason Fung likes to say diabetes is a dietary disease, and it requires a dietary cure. We get it primarily from the foods we eat and the overdose of sugar, carbs, and flours, breads. If you've recently been diagnosed with diabetes and you've just discovered this channel, let me recommend that you go to our Uploads page, which will give you access to every diabetic video we've posted since we began. As you work your way through all our videos, I believe you'll find the help you need. A link to our Uploads page is in the description.